Episode is Eli Goldstein, best known as half of the DJ and production duo LOOPLAB, which has gained international recognition in the 2010s for their unique blend of house, funk, soul, and disco music. In addition to a music career that has spanned 20 plus years, Eli recently completed his master's in climate science and policy at Bard College's Center for Environmental Policy, with an intention to make a greener space in the music industry. Beyond climate work, Eli also devotes energy to Give a Beat, to use the power of music to fight mass incarceration, and also the LOOPLAB, to empower women and people of color in the media arts. Please welcome Eli.
He played the bass, and so jazz music was a part of my life from really early on, and started playing saxophone when I was a little kid, and that was all really important, but I was just fascinated by hip hop and DJs and then electronic music. And I went to a rave when I was 14. And that was like, music could bring people together in that way and could dance all night. And I just remember the doors opening of the venue and the sun rays shining in and just dancing in those sun rays and just knowing that this is all I really ever wanted to do in my life. I managed to make that my job for, 25 years now. And I think just this is like the 90s, the mid 90s in the Boston area. And there's just something so powerful about the community spirit of electronic music. And just, it was born as this like subversive movement of marginalized people, and as a way to create spaces where people could feel safe where they weren't safe otherwise. I mean, by the time I showed up in the 90s, it had changed a lot. There was already so many different genres and subcultures. But I think, overall, and even to this day, like electronic music, dance music is this language, this space, this culture that brings people together in a way that makes us feel safe in places that we don't always feel safe in the bigger world. Mm. So I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so thankful that I found dance music, found electronic music when I did. And it's, shaped me in so many ways as the human I am.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that the rave as a 14-year-old is sort of like the catalyst that sparked this passion for music. And then so you went to this rave, you had a transformative experience. I've heard that it's like that for a lot of people who go to Burning Man. And so for you, was it, you went to go to this rave, were you like, I'm going to pick up an instrument, or was it, I'm going to pick up DJing? Like, what was the first step for you from going from experience to taking action? So
I was already playing saxophone. I was like, playing jazz music in a group with some friends and in my school band. And I was actually like at my high school, they had like a synthesizer lab. So I was able to take a synth class. It was amazing. That's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I was already like listening to this music and experimenting with it, and I actually had bought a shitty turntable and a mixer, and so I was already like curious about DJing. So that was just like the stamp. It was like, I know what I want to do. Now I'm gonna go all in. And since the only real job I had was actually working to save money to buy turntables, and then I started a DJ company with my best friend, and we DJ'd our school dances, and then bar mitzvahs, and then weddings, and then clubs, and it was just, I don't know. I was very lucky that I found this passion, and I just was like so focused on it from jump.
That's so awesome. I love the entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, as a high schooler DJing bar mitzvahs. What were some of the big challenges that you felt like you had to overcome, like as you were getting started?
I mean, I think the initial one is just really trying to figure out what DJs were even doing, right? Because this is like, you just had to go and watch. Like I would listen to recordings, or I would listen to, it started like with hip hop. That's when I first heard DJs with scratching. And then I would hear started buying mixtapes and then got to see them in person. So a lot of it was just sitting there and watching what the DJ was doing. That was like the first hurdle, was like, how does it even work? What am I even trying to do? and then, figuring out how to mix two records together. And where to buy the music I wanted was like a big thing. You actually had to buy the records in a shop. And so I think that was a lot of the hurdles, was just like the creatively, like how to do this. Like like I said, I was lucky. I had my friend. We were like committed. We were like involved, and then we had more friends, and we would just get together and just practice and scratch. Like there was definitely still some scratching in that side of it involved. But then as I got more and more into dance music, like, just making mixtapes.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then fast forwarding a little bit to you're spending a lot of time DJing bar mitzvahs, you're starting this business, DJing for folks. And then at what point, where does Soul Clap fit into this? When did you and Charles meet? Yeah. How did that manifest? Was it his bar mitzvah you DJ?
So we actually grew up on opposite sides of the Charles River. So he's from Brookline, Massachusetts. I'm from Cambridge. And we had a mutual friend in high school who had various names: Vegan Pete, Sour Pete, Hardcore Pete.
Sauerkraut Pete.
He knew we were both like going to raves and DJing, and he introduced us. And so, we're both like two Jewish kids, like not a lot of DJs at that time. We're like, wow, we're both into like house music and similar stuff. And we started DJing together. And then Charlie went to college, but we like had this connection of going record shopping together. So he would come back. He's a year older than me. And we would just go record shopping together and bring the records back to one of our houses and just then mix for just hours and hours. And we were connected that way. And then we ended up with a gig. Like we both got booked for a party, and then one of the rooms got shut down. So we had to go back to back at that party. And we're like, oh, this is cool. This is fun. And soon after, like, we started actually sharing our record collection. We would just go, because we were going record shopping together all the time. And we're like, why are we spending money on two sets of like two of the same record? Let's just combine. And we actually had those records to this year in my parents' basement. Still, like, the majority of our collection was living. And we had to empty it out this year because it got too moldy down there. So we got rid of a lot of records, but we still had this like shared base of Soul Clap musical, shared music for so many years, 20 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, do you remember your first record? One of your first records?
I mean, I was buying jazz records first, but like first like dance record. One of the really early ones was a Danny Tenaglia track called "Oh No," which I remember buying it. Newbury Comics, Cambridge. Nice. But Tenaglia. I mean, he was already legendary at that moment. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you and Charles became great friends and started playing together, started producing together. What was the critical inflection point, you'd say, in your career that made you guys think, okay, there's something here, we can do this, we're doing this?
So, I mean, we had this mobile DJ business still. Like, this is like around 2007. We're still DJing like any, whatever we can do, wherever we can DJ to pay the bills. Like a lot of clubs, a lot of top 40, bottle service clubs, whatever, like promoting nightclubs in Boston. But still, like, me and Charlie would do like underground nights when we could. But like, the house scene was just teeny at this. For 2007, it was like hip hop just dominated everything. And we had a friend and mentor, DJ Khan, who's like legendary vinyl digger and disco DJ from Boston. And, he said to us, he's like, look, guys, if you're 40 and you're still doing this, would you be happy with your lives? And we're like, actually, no, fuck that, no. And we had started, experimenting, we'd been making music kind of like on the side for fun, learning how to do it. I had that synthesizer class, so I had some background, and I had like a sampler that I had played around with when I was in high school and college. And we're like, no. So we sold our stake in the mobile DJ business. We were like, we can't do this anymore. Our partner was like the one who was like the most like business oriented, like the VIP table dude. And we were just like, we need to focus our energy on making music and see what happens. Give it a year of making music and see if we can actually have a career in the creative side, not just the DJing as a jukebox or whatever side, mobile DJing side. And so we just got super serious. And we actually, like, in order to pay the bills, we still were DJing at department stores and private events like that. So we still managed to find a way that was a little more creative. And actually, the funny thing was, at those gigs, we were playing like disco edits and making our own edits of things like Fleetwood Mac and like more like accessible stuff, but in our own way. And then we were making like house and techno, or like techno-y house, whatever that sound was in the late noughties. And going to a lot of like minimal, it was like kind of like minimal and like minimal techno. It was big in New York, so we'd be coming down to New York a lot and going to the parties here, like Black Market Membership and Resolute, still doing it. So we were making those records, and like we put a couple things out on some labels, but it was cool. But then we met Wolf and Lamb at their space, the Marcy Hotel, which is actually right up the street from here. And they were like not interested in that minimal techno. They had been doing minimal techno, and they're like, there's something else that we're trying to do here. Mm-hmm. And they heard our edits, and they were like, this is exactly what we're trying to put our finger on. And so we got super close with them, and they were like ascendant at that moment, like really like, you know, coming up in Europe, and just their name was super hot, and their label was putting out music from, you know, very early on, Seth Troxler, Nicholas Jarre. And so we got on that train, and that was like the big thing. So it actually was the mobile DJing that helped get us on in that moment when it was such a minimal techno, robotic time of electronic music, bringing in this more organic and soulful sound into it. Was just like very much the right place, right time. But our, you know, experience of having to play all genres in Boston ended up being what helped us.
That's so funny. I love this journey from bar mitzvahs to big department stores.
Yeah, we really made it.
Yeah. Thank you, Nordstrom. It's so interesting. You're talking about, you know, meeting Wolf and Lamb, and on some level, like, you know, in every successful artist's journey, there's a pivotal moment, if you will, that creates that inflection point. And it sounds like meeting these guys, you know, going through your story, meeting these guys was sort of that, because they helped you isolate on the sound for you guys. How did you guys meet again, and how did that relationship develop?
So yeah, there was a you know, we were coming down to New York a lot. It's like there was the Chinatown bus that was like $20. You would take it from Chinatown, Boston to Chinatown, New York. And so we would, you know, be coming down on the bus, partying all night, and then taking the bus home the next afternoon. And there was like a festival in New York that happened at Coney Island called Mini Tech in, I think, 2008. And it was a total disaster. Like, really, the promoter just bit off way more than they could chew. It like rained the whole first day. Everybody was miserable. But we ended up, like, we had heard about this Marcy Hotel place. And so we ended up, when the festival ended, stumbling over there. It was on Marcy, right next to the BQE, just like right up further down Grand, basically. And it was kind of like this space. I'm like, it's cool to see spaces like this still existing in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg. That like, they lived there. They had their friends living in an apartment above, and then more friends living in the apartment above. And then, you know, it was a studio sometimes, like during the week, but then they would turn it into a underground club on the weekends. You know? Sounds familiar.
We did not rehearse that. Just to be clear.
And so we stumbled there after the festival, and we actually ended up going up the stairs to the apartment upstairs by accident first, and someone was like, "Hey, have a joint," and I was like, "Okay, cool." And then we realized that wasn't actually the party, so we went downstairs, and Zev started hitting on Charlie's girlfriend. So it was cool. I mean, you know, everything was chill, but it was this so then Charlie and him started talking, and like they connected over his girlfriend, And so like we started talking to them, also, two Jewish guys making house music involved in that scene. We're two Jewish guys in Boston doing it. And we just had this connection. Similar, like, also over this music, like coming from this minimal world, but looking for something else that maybe was more soulful and easier to move your hips to. We really connected over that when we started. And at that time also like Skype was this huge thing. So we would just be talking on Skype like every day. It's so fun. I'm dating myself in so many ways. So like the eras, but like it's technology really plays such a big part in all of this, I think. And like we see this now, like whatever the dominant technology is kind of influences how the music's made and then how the music is shared. So at that time, Skype was like the way as well. Yeah.
I think what I really love about that story is you were talking about how everyone was doing one thing, and it was you were zagging when everyone was zigging, if you will, or zigging when everyone was zagging. But it's really interesting to go through your catalog and think about, okay, what is it about Soul Clap that makes your music so unique? How do you think about, now that you've had some years to look back on your sound, how do you think about your sound now as this unique, definitive sound of that era and still today?
I mean, that era was very much about slowing it down. Like we were just trying to make the music slower and slower, I guess. But then also bringing in a lot of like, almost pop elements, right? Like vocals in times when there wasn't really any vocals on the music. But then looking back, I mean, it's just always been about being eclectic, like just not trying to fit into one genre, like taking influences from everywhere and just always kind of experimenting with how we're throwing them together into the pot and seeing what that ends up as. I think that's a big piece of it, and not just like getting stuck in one sound. It was always about trying to find the next thing.
Yeah, it's just interesting because, having spoken to so many people in the industry, whether you're in music or just the arts, so many of the executives, the suits, if you will, are always looking for someone to sound like everything else that's out there. And it's through being eclectic that you guys were able to break out, through being completely unique. I'm curious about your creative process and specifically, so much of the artist's journey, whether you're a musician or a painter or a writer, is essentially finding your own voice. And so when you think about, when you've had time to reflect on your voice, I'm curious about the process of discovering that voice for you guys as a duo and how that relates to a lot of the stuff that you grew up with, talking about playing, jazz growing up, the different records that you first collected growing up. How did you what was this process of discovering your voice like for you?
Of the actual making music? Yeah. I think once going back to like the technology, the medium, like finding Ableton Live actually was this huge moment of opening us up creatively, because we had been on Logic before, which was much more technical, I guess. And then Ableton allowed us to kind of just take samples or sounds or drum loops or whatever and throw them in there and layer them all together into new compositions. And I think that really opened it up, just that workflow being so smooth and easy and allowing us to connect with our influences and our roots in a way. But I think it's a constant process, is finding the voice. And like, I think this is part of the later conversation about climate and nature and everything, but I think finding new inspirations and new places, new sounds, new anything that's going to bring different voices, different creative inspiration into it is part of what keeps me going as an artist.
When you sit down to make a track, for example, like what is your process? Do you begin with the end in mind? Do you just wildly experiment? Like where do you find inspiration for starting a new piece of work?
I think often it's just jamming, and that's especially like really the Soul Clap way. When we were still just using computers, we would actually each have a laptop with Ableton and just plug in, and each of us would jam on our laptop. And then that, as we started getting synthesizers and other gear, it would be jamming on the gear. And that's still how kind of I just turn everything on in my studio and see what happens. I mean, I'm trying to be more intentional. I think like talk about like getting, you know, honing in inspirations and growing as an artist, like trying to be more intentional about what I'm using as my inspiration, like what I'm starting with, what the starting point is, and also what I want the ending point to be. Mm-hmm. I think as I get, you know, more experienced, better as a musician slowly over the years, that's something that you can do. Whereas at the beginning, it was just kind of figuring it out as we went. So yeah, I mean, I think more now I try to be really intentional, but I think jamming is still really a key part of it.
How did you used to jam back then that's different than how you do it now? Or maybe a better way to phrase this would be, you know, now that you've been doing this for a little bit, how has your process for making art evolved over time?
I mean, now I think there's just a lot more thought and like research and understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish that goes into it. So I'm gonna skip ahead now. Like I'm really trying to just write music that is connecting to the like oneness of myself, of humans with nature. Like how do I embody that? How do I let nature be like a voice or like an instrument? How do I communicate what's happening with climate change and what's happening with our planet with music or with words even, you know, trying to write words and lyrics and poetry for that. So like in this moment now, like I'm in a very like, you know, different moment. I have like after doing this kind of whole academic period that now I have all this different knowledge to draw from as I'm writing music. Mm-hmm. And that's like still very new for me. So I'm almost in this like new discovery period of what that's all going to sound like.
That's interesting. Where did this passion for climate and on some level, you know, you've also done a lot of work with activism, empowering people of color in music, diversity in music, whether it's racial diversity, gender diversity. Where did this activism bent come from for you?
So, I mean, it's definitely just in my blood. My father's peace activist and has done a lot of work, anti-nuclear work. And so I grew up going to protests. My mom is an early childhood educator who's done a lot of work around children and media. And they're both college professors. That's why I grew up in Cambridge. And, you know, it's like a very, very academic place. And like, so I think that's like obviously in my blood, and like growing up, going to protests and like just being involved in activism or seeing what that was like from a very young age. It's kind of permeated everything I do. And like, you know, I mean, having the privilege of getting to travel around the world playing music, especially like sharing positive vibrations and like really trying to bring good energy to dance floors and bringing people together is beautiful and amazing. And like, you know, I don't take that for granted at all. But at some point I was like, I need more than this. It's not enough to just do music. And it was very organic in that a friend of mine started this initiative, Sammy Bananas, started an initiative for DJs to offset our carbon emissions from flying. This is like way back in 2013. And that's what became DJs for Climate Action. So he was a friend, he shared it with me. It was like 3 tiers. You could either offset a little bit, a medium amount, or a lot of flying. And so, you know, I was flying a lot at that time. It's like, cool, this is a great way to do something. But I really didn't know much about climate change. And that like, you know, the light bulb went off. And I started talking to Sam, and then just like learning more and we quickly realized that offsetting wasn't really the solution that we wanted to be pushing. But we wanted to figure out a way to help DJs, help each other, use our platforms to educate and inspire climate action. And so we launched this Earth Night initiative where we organized an event in New York the first year in 2017. And that's now we've been doing, this is going to be our seventh year. Yeah. In 2024, just as an opportunity for the nightlife community to come together, raise money, raise awareness about climate change, and over time, like to create events that embody sustainability and regenerative parties with events. So we can set examples. So events can set examples. So venues can take steps to be more sustainable. And so that was like a journey, like learning about climate via that organization. And, there's not a lot of artists like that are outspoken about this stuff. And I'm very naturally like happy to be outspoken about stuff from my activist roots. And so I started getting to asked to like speak on panels about sustainability and climate in the music industry. And I had learned some stuff, but I very obviously was not an expert and felt kind of weird like being looked to as an expert on it. And so I had started looking at this program at Bard, and then the pandemic happened and I couldn't tour anyway, so I went back to school. So it was kind of this perfect timing, and now I can go and speak on panels and I actually know what I'm talking about, which is great. Yeah. But I do think like as music, climate specifically is this like huge, overwhelming, scary problem that we're all facing. And like, top-down government, UN, international, global solutions really are not solving the problem. And we're really going to need this transformational shift in our culture and like the systems that we live in. And music is something that actually can, empower cultural shifts and can reach people in their hearts and inspire change, not just like numbers or policy or any of these things, which are obviously important too, but music is how you actually inspire people to change. So I think like we have a responsibility, especially coming from this electronic music, this dance music community that was born from this, from these marginalized people. And like, we have to carry the spirit and this tradition on. And I really feel like that's, my responsibility. Like, I have to do it.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Yeah. And also, your friends have the best names. Sammy Banana, Sourdough Pete. Or was it Sauerkraut Pete?
Sour Pete. Sauerkraut is good. Sour Pete.
Sauerkraut Pete.
Yeah.
Sauerkraut Sam. No, that's awesome, man. I love that. It's so interesting because so much of, I think, an outsider's perspective of musicians and artists is that that's like the only thing you do is your art. And, we also look at I think people think of the artist's career as this linear path of just being an artist. But, as artists, we're multifaceted. We do multiple things. Sometimes we have day jobs. Sometimes we go back to school. It's incredible to hear, you talking about going back to school, especially as an adult, after having been a musician for such a long time as well. How do you balance that now in your life today, being both a musician, producer, artist, and then also, on the other hand, an activist with the work you're doing now with DJs for Climate Change?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's a challenge, right? Time is like the biggest premium these days, with so many things taking our attention and also so many interests and things to accomplish. I also am a father of two, so that's like another huge time suck. But it's like it's figuring out. Yeah, I mean, it's learning how to prioritize, and also like I said, I'm learning after like having this period of academic focus, like how to focus back on creative, like purely creative pursuit of it, and how that can guide it. And I think it also like, that guided me, like my creative practice guided me through writing a thesis, and like, it's all very connected. And, I continue to DJ on the weekends. So that's like, keeps me inspired in that way. But it's definitely a challenge. I mean, it's hard enough to keep a music career going. It's hard enough to keep a family going. It's hard enough to be an activist and not get burned out. So, but I do find that like they feed each other. They really do. And like the inspiration from each one keeps me going with the other ones. But then it's also just being realistic about time, that like, I'm not going to finish things so quickly. And I think, for all of us, that's, I think, a really valuable lesson, that like, we're kind of taught that things have to happen super fast. But in the scheme of everything, like, it's all, it's all really, really teeny. So like, if it happens in a day, or if it happens in 10 years, if you finish it and it's something beautiful, then it's something to be proud of, and something to be strive for.
Love that. It's really all part of the process, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your goals now for DJs for Climate Action? Where do you want to take it? Where do you see it going next?
Yeah. So also challenging is that we've been entirely volunteer run for like 10 years. So there's like a core crew, and then there's people, DJs that come and go, or other volunteers that come and go and support. Whenever someone new comes in, it's like new energy that helps move us forward. And we've really realized that we just have to focus from initiative to initiative. But Earth Night is something that we've kept going. So we're working now on Earth Night 2024, trying to continue to have it grow and just be clearer about what it is and accomplish these goals of inspiring change. But then also like really the goal right now is starting a record label that is either like cooperative business model or nonprofit or both, where nature actually is one of the owners and artists on the label. So we can figure out a way that all the projects are then going back to help fund nature. And nature is actually like a co-creator. So like if we're using field recordings or, going to work in different community, like an indigenous community and record some of their sounds of their nature or like of their practices, then we can actually have it built into the business model that we're paying out nature or that community as an artist of the project. I think there's definitely more and more of this movement of like, nature sounds or nature music. But I think really trying to take that a step further and like actually have nature as the artist, and how do we do that and how do we nurture that? And I think that's like a great way for us to bring all of the goals of DJs for Climate Action together. Which we actually, we have this we have these 4 pillars, which is a commitment to, if I remember them off the top. It's a commitment to each other and the pursuit of climate justice. It's connection to ourselves, to our communities, and to our planet. It's courage to persevere in the face of systemic resistance, and creativity to inspire, educate, and sprout joy. So we try to kind of base our actions, our initiatives off of those pillars, because there's so many things pulling us in different directions. But also to be a proper nonprofit, do some fundraising, and pay ourselves, each other, for the work. That's something is one of the goals for sure. Yeah.
How can we help? What would be a good call to action for tonight? I know you're also playing a show tonight.
Yeah, come dance.
We sent that link out for folks in the WhatsApp chat, the RSVP and ticket link to Eli's set tonight. And Jolene, what time are you playing?
We're actually playing at 2.
Playing at 2.
Not at 12, but 2 is...
So we'll go late here, and then we'll head over there.
But yeah, I mean, like call to action, like as individuals, or like as business owners, or like in our industries, there's like a lot that we can do in all of those facets. I mean, there's this like, it's hard because there's this idea of like carbon footprint, like what we each emit or like what our businesses emit, that was created by the fossil fuel industry. So we would feel like it's more this personal responsibility instead of trying to change the system. However, there's like a real power in measuring, whether that's your personal emissions for a year, is to see like from flying, from driving, from heating and cooling your home, from whatever. There's ways to calculate it. And then setting goals to reduce that every year, right? Like the UN like has the set stated goals, which is cutting our emissions in half by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050. So, a lot of activities from many industries are going to have to continue to emit fossil fuels, like making steel or like, I don't know, that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But, because there's this like, we have to transition away as much as possible, but there's still going to have to be emissions. Like in music, like in electronic music, DJs are going to continue to fly around, and they should continue to fly around. This is like such an integral part of the culture. Like, I don't think like shaming people or like telling people to stop flying tomorrow is going to solve anything. We do have to cut down, right? Like, if we say you're taking 10 flights, say you're taking 50 flights this year, like how do you make that 40 next year? How do you make that 30 the year after? How do you keep cutting that down? You know, like that's why measuring is important. So whether it's literally measuring your CO2 emissions or just like certain activities, how many times you do them and how you can do them less, I think that's really important. That's an important call to action. Just being conscious of like how you're impacting your community and the world. I also think like it's really important to collaborate, to come together. If there's other people who are doing work in the space or really in any, you know, positive social action, planetary action, any of these things is collaborating together. You know, I think it's often people want to reinvent the wheel or find their own way of doing something. But when it comes to like making positive change, we're so much stronger, so much more powerful working together. So how do we create these spaces to collaborate? How do we, you know, build capacity to do bigger and bigger things? And number 3, I would say like, how do we bring like storytelling about climate and nature and communities, our communities, frontline communities, indigenous communities into our work? How do we learn about that, educate ourselves, and then bring that into our work as creators, as creatives, as artists? You know, how does that inspire us? But then how do we use that inspiration to actually share these stories and connect with people in their hearts about it? So those are some calls to action. And then, yeah, like if you want to support DJs for Climate Action, there's a number of ways that you can check out our website, both financially or getting involved with our initiatives. We're, you know, like I said, we're volunteer run. So people power is so important.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like something that we think about as a community is how can we come together as a community to help push forward change in a positive direction.
Yeah.
Want to end it with one last question. When you look back on the arc of your career, especially from how you started, you know, hustling at bar mitzvahs to the department stores, and now you're, you know, taking that entrepreneurial spirit as a creator and combining it with your passion for the arts to push change forward. What advice would you give your younger self or even people in the room today, if any, about what you would do, either do differently or what you would double down on to accelerate with what you're doing, accelerate to where you are now?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm really thankful that I just kind of stayed independent. There were opportunities to like work with bigger labels or work with bigger organizations. And we said no to those opportunities, which maybe would have made us more money or, you know, led to higher profile career. But I really think looking back, like happiness doesn't necessarily come from those things. Like having the privilege to like be able to stay true creatively and just like experiment and keep pushing forward in our own direction, in my own direction, has really been the most satisfying part of my career. And I mean, like, you know, it's still, you know, I think probably because of that, I still struggle sometimes financially and like, you know, but it was, that commitment is like still now has allowed me to follow this activism path, follow this climate path, to speak for myself, to be outspoken. I think like that independence, like being able to build your own thing, and it can be way, way harder at moments. But I think in the long run, like sticking with it is so important and so fulfilling.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me. We've got questions. Sure. Yeah.
So, well, we have time for a couple of questions. We'd love to open it up to the floor. I see a hand right there.
I wanted to know a little bit more about what you said about incorporating nature in your music. Obviously, you like have okay, I'm going to have this yoga meditation and there's going to be nature sounds, but that's not really like house music. You know, how do you incorporate? I mean, is that what you're doing? Incorporating nature sounds into house music? I'm just curious more about what you're doing.
So this kind of whole idea started for me and for DJs for Climate Action. We did something we called the Climate Sample Pack, where we collaborated with Greenpeace. They gave us access to all of their field recordings, and we curated a sample pack for producers from those field recordings, and then had a contest where producers could submit music. We put that music, we crowdfunded a vinyl compilation of all the best music that we selected that was pressed on this new injection molded non-PVC plastic vinyl process. So it's like literally like taking the nature sounds, making electronic music with it, and then putting it on a media that was more green and more nature friendly.
Turntable?
That it can actually play. Yeah, it's a record that works. It sounds almost as good as a regular PVC record. So it's like, so that was the start of the journey. So like that like just literally taking sounds, field recordings from all around the world from Greenpeace and putting them into electronic music is like a way of, I think, exploring like what we said, what do you want your future to sound? What do we want our future to sound like? So how do you take that and recontextualize that in a way that's like creatively connected to the electronic music or dance music or whatever genre you're making. So that was like the beginning. Now I'm really trying to like experiment more like with recording around my where I live. Like actually live in the country. So I have like different ecosystems I can explore and record and then mix them together into new things. This is still really new. And I'm not really sure how it works other than like being sound explorations. Like I do think, yeah, it's important. Like for house music, I'm trying to figure out how I can incorporate that into my house music so it can actually hit in the club, but like people still has some kind of resonance in a way that it might if you were outside in a natural area where it was recorded. It's really still an experimentation.
And is that Greenpeace stuff? Is that like on Spotify or something?
Yeah. It's called Climate Soundtrack. You can get it on Spotify. There's like 4 volumes on Spotify, and then on the DJs for Climate Action Bandcamp, you can actually buy the record compilation. We still have some left. Yeah.
Omar. So first of all, thanks for having this discussion. This is fascinating. I think one of the things I want to ask you as somebody who's been a professional musician for so long, you talked a little bit about technology and how that helps you create music, and I think one of the things we've seen is that technology really democratizes music to the masses. Right now, you said you have some background in kind of learning synthesizers, and now you've got all these soft synths that cost a couple $100, emulating 1,000 pieces, $1,000 of equipment. And we can only anticipate that with AI and that sort of thing, it's going to become democratized even more than that. So how do you see that impacting the industry as a whole and your ability to, like you said, maintain a career as a professional musician?
I mean, I think it's harder and harder. And I think, yeah, I've listened to people talk about AI, and it's like happening now already. Like, this music AI software is like, within the next year or two, it's going to be a completely different way of producing music. And like you said, completely democratized. It's going to make, I think it's like, yeah, it makes it harder. I do think there's no substitute though for like that moment of a human having like a beautiful creative idea and the song that comes from that. And I do think that kind of transcends, like those moments do transcend. And it doesn't matter what the tools are. It's like when you have that inspiration in the studio, I mean, as a musician, a lot of the best songs are the ones that happen in 30 minutes when it's just like that spark. And if anything, that I think, more democratized tools, more tools will make it easier and create more sparks for more people. So I don't know if that's good or bad. It's definitely harder. It's definitely really hard. I mean, even from when I was coming up to now, the amount of DJs and producers is like exponentially more competition. So, I think it's just all about going back to this, staying true to yourself, like just working and like doing your thing and making sure you're true to your vision. And then hopefully it works and you're lucky, and it does. I don't know.
Thanks so much, Eli. Thanks, everybody. Stick around. We have drinks over there. The basement's going to be open as well, so feel free to mingle.